Hello, everybody. Welcome. Deeply grateful for those of you who watch my videos or listen to them. And I hope to make, visual videos. I'm hoping actually to get something like a whiteboard or a clear board and set up a way for me to make, videos where I can draw when I'm talking, because it's actually really important for us to have visual input, and even to see each other's facial expressions and hand movements. Hand talking is a crucial aspect of human intelligence and communication that's easily lost in the modern context. I don't know if I'll succeed. It's been a kind of a background vision for a long time, and set up a little studio where I could make nice, well-produced videos. Perhaps one day soon that will happen. We'll see. But I'm really grateful for those of you who wander with me and learn with me, explore with me, discover together. And I welcome your questions and comments on the videos, so you can help me continue my work in lots of different ways. But if you feel moved to support what I'm doing, please take a moment, like my videos, share them, comment, ask questions, contradict me. Hell, let's have an argument if you'd like. Though that's not my preferred mode. When I'm making my videos, it's important to... Sometimes I have to change my inner mood, my orientation. And it's a little bit magical, because I might be feeling very sad or confused or trapped or, sick or tired or worried, anxious. I have all the feelings that we all experience as humans. But when I'm making my videos, I transform, because the context transforms. I make a new context where I imagine that we're all together and we're trying to understand fundamental qualities and situations in our existence as beings and organisms and animals and human beings and men or women or however we may identify. And there aren't many places in our lives where we do this together. I was very concerned about this as a young adult. I thought, where do the adults go to come together and learn and try to understand? And that's very different from dictating the assembled knowledge of other historical groups and individuals, which is a lot of what happens in schools. But it just occurred to me that there was a great poverty in adulthood. When we were children, we played. Most of the time we could, almost any time we could, we would play together. And we would have incredible adventures in the simplest circumstances with, nothing more elaborate than a stick and a leaf and a chunk of dirt and some water or something, right? We didn't need anything complex to entertain us. We made entertainment with our minds together. There's an eros of play. Yeah, it's natural to children. And they would love to include the adults. It can be quite difficult because the adults generally are trapped in other layers of thought, concern, identity, role, necessity, awareness. So it can be sometimes difficult for the children to really recruit the adults into authentic play. Though at other times they succeed half without trying, right? Even if only for a moment. The child or the children will do something together that's so profound or beautiful that the armor of the adults is momentarily pierced, and they feel their hearts. And they feel the power of free imagination embodied in their children. And the spirit of discovery and exploration and mutual recognition, kindness, sharing. It's amazing to watch a very young child. Like, I imagine a situation in which there are two young children and perhaps they're not very familiar with each other. This may be their first moment of meeting. And who knows, maybe one of them has, something shareable. It might be food or a flower or a toy. And one of them goes through an interior process that's invisible to us, whereby they decide to take a risk. And they may not consciously think of it as a risk. They probably don't, especially if they're very small. And I'm thinking of very small children, maybe 2-year-olds or something. And the child who has, say, the flowers decides to take a risk and approach the other child and offer the flower. And of course, what's really interesting here is the little piece of food or the candy or the flower or the toy or even a leaf or, almost anything, right? That flower, it's not a symbol in a technical language, which is the wrong language here, but it's a hypostasis. It's a lesser physical stabilization of something miraculous, right? And the miraculousness is the memory of being together, and that we're fundamentally together, even though appearances and thoughts can lead us to presume or act otherwise. So one of the children becomes momentarily courageous. Why do I say they are courageous? Well, the other child's behavior is yet unpredictable, right? There's no historical data to draw on, except maybe, other instances of trying to share the flower or the candy or... So the children are still unknown to each other, but even if they're unknown to each other, they have a sense of the spirit between them. It forms almost immediately when they come into proximity. Yeah? They sense there's a... Language will never capture what that sense is. We call it intuition. That's the way of dismissing it. And it's actually, I suspect, not one sense, but many senses that form a unity. So maybe one of the children becomes courageous. And they're courageous because the other child could, respond in almost any way. They could ignore them, right? Which socially, because what's happening isn't just happening in the two children. The children are aware of being observed. Even if they're not being directly observed at the moment, They're deeply aware that, for children, there are gods. The parents are gods when we are children. It's not a mere analogy. Yet perhaps it's not explicitly true either. So the children are also aware of observation, and if the gesture is rejected, right, there's emotional transformations, sequelae, consequences, if the flower is rejected. Or if the gesture is ignored, or if the other child just turns away and stomps off, or maybe the other child actually becomes violent and punches the flower, attacks the flower, or throws something at the one offering it. There's all kinds of possible bad outcomes, and all of these would be observed, right? And even the children, they've built an inner observational overlay that isn't just observation, it imagines being observed, right? And this is part of what makes play fascinating, is that while we're engaged in it, we're imagining other observers. Whether, again, we're conscious of this or not isn't the important thing, though the difference matters. No, we can imagine forms of observers there are no words for. We can imagine that the world is observing us. We can imagine that everything is observing us. We can imagine gods observing us. We can imagine devils observing us, ghosts, aliens, other humans. And in a way, the context is observing us. If we are in a living place, everything is paying attention. There's an animal here, a big one. It's a complex one. Everything notices. The insects, the birds, the animals, the plants, the earth itself, the sky itself, the sun, the moon. So one of the children becomes brave and offers the flower. A gesture of communion, co-being, as if to say, we are together, all is good, we are friends, we will care for each other, kindness is real, we can become it, or even something beyond love, right? Apparently love is the highest emotion? I don't think so. Love's really good when it's authentic and true. But no, there's something even deeper than that comes before the unity is broken down into branches and classifications. The emotional unity, the interiority of the child. What is alive in them? And what is alive in them is astonishing, far beyond our simple language about, being a human being or having a soul or being a soul. No, we are more than an array of souls. We are lineages, unimaginable lineages of life on earth. And histories long before there was an earth are embodied in each one of us. We are older than there's language to describe, younger than something just arrived. At the same time, the categories are destroyed by what we are, not validated. So one of the children takes a risk and carries the flower to the other, and the flower becomes a vehicle of the expression of something, right? The children don't think, oh, what is the most valuable thing I can give? And then go looking for a really precious thing to give. They're Their naivete is their superpower here, right? They don't go looking for diamonds or Ferraris or, houses or yachts, right, to give. They find something that will serve not merely... See, the children are so young that possessions don't even really matter to them yet. Possession's a very momentary state for children, because when it's not in your hand, it's not in your mind anymore, right? So the children are looking for a way to... They'll find something good enough to act as the vehicle or the vessel or the hypostasis of the, expression and embodiment of reunion and love and compassion and wonder and mutual being. But it doesn't have to be anything important, because it's not meant to be preserved or analyzed or, accounting games done on it. And we could learn a lot from the children if we would just understand this thing, right? What the children are transmitting isn't the flower, it's the beauty. The children are transmitting the beauty and recollecting one another into communion. Becoming together the original light. Remembering, literally, remembering together. Us poor adults were buried in structured nonsense, so that we might be inclined, when a gift is given, to do accounting. And when a gift is chosen, to do accounting. We might be inclined to forget the transmission and its spirit and its power to heal, to reassure, to overcome suffering, loneliness, fear, injury, isolation, to renew, to rejuvenate, to restore. And I suffer from all these things the adults suffer from. Even though I can see past them on a good moment, in a good day, from a good perspective, I understand these problems not because I've escaped them, but because I experienced them. As we get older, it becomes difficult to even remember the naive power, the momentous power of the innocence we all still carry within us. Without that innocence, I think knowledge and formal structure would be impossible. And yet, there's a way of making imprints on that innocence that inhibit or prohibit it over time. And these imprints build up, and we end up in a world of thoughts and concepts, tokens and accounting, legalisms and language, which is an uninhabitable world. Oh, I mean, there's branches you can set up shop in there and stuff. Some of them are even beautiful, but it's only inhabitable when there are other streams of motivation and inspiration that enliven our relationships with our representational cognition and the strange faculties that emerge from it. Often the estranged faculties. Estranged from what? Well, from our interiority, from our nature, from our souls, from our dreaming, from our imagination, from our play, from our potential, from myriads of potentials that we naturally embody and are often closer than our hand, yet more invisible than space without light. When I was thinking of the children, I was feeling like the child who wants to give a flower. But as an adult, one may have all kinds of trouble doing something this simple because we're afraid of what others may think. What will they make of it, of this offering? How will we be seen? How will we be judged? And not just that, how are we being seen? And who is seeing us and why? Why are they looking? The theys. The library of theys that do or might look upon us. And while that sense and awareness is a natural aspect of our human inheritance, it's a terrifying thing in modernity, and it's been terrifying before. In a case it isn't obvious, one of the fundamental features of religion is the description of the ultimate observer, right? Who are the ultimate observers? The observers above all others, who in many cases are not themselves observed. Or if they are, it's certainly not clear what might be observing them. Now think about, for a moment, the peculiar situation we find ourselves in day-to-day life, but also inside ourselves in our minds, right? And that mental interiority is something we're having and doing with ourselves. Right? We might pretend, but we are pretending that there are others there. Now, of course, it gets complex. We can... People in our actual lives can certainly become stars in the constellation of our mind. The topic is so deep, and there's so many interesting branches, I'm not sure where to navigate here. This observation thing. And observation doesn't have to be visual. Though it's a peculiar thought experiment, and maybe we could ask blind people if they imagine that others observe them. Of course, there'd be different kinds of people who are blind, some of whom have never seen, and some of whom suffered blindness after having seen, and some of whom suffered blindness and then had their sight restored. And each of these might have different general, experiences and feelings about observation. Who's watching, why they're watching, when are they watching, What are they doing with what they see or derive? All these things, yeah. When I'm with animals, we don't just observe each other. The animals are aware of observation in some of the ways that we are, although social animals are very uniquely adapted to pay very close attention to being observed. And we are this kind of animal. We're probably the most extreme example of that property in animals, in nature, certainly that we know of. There's no animal more interested in being positively observed than human beings. And they compete for positive observation in all, even in the structured contexts, right? Child takes a risk and offers the unknown child a flower. But what they're offering isn't the flower. And so neither child is probably thinking anything like, stories about flowers, or this is a romantic exchange, or the flower doesn't last, what good is that? Or I will keep this flower forever, or they're just not having any of this cognition, right? They're so in the moment. None of that structure is forming in the half-dreaming foam of their awareness. In a way, they're like angels or something. They're so... It's not that they're unimprinted, because they arrive, I guess, it seems, with something like unique schemas of character and affinity, disaffinities, things they naturally go toward or avoid that are unique in each child, and some of their nature as an animal, which is certainly not their entire nature, or as an organism, still not their entire nature. Some of the qualities and characteristics they embody will have been conveyed and modulated over vast, really inconceivable quantities of time if we think biologically. And not just from their human ancestors, though certainly from their human ancestors, but from every creature their ancestors interacted with. Yeah? The food they ate, the weather where they lived, the mountain, the lake, the mice, the diseases, everything. There's this, very important conservation that's occurred that again is uniquely embodied in each child. It's not purely a mechanical process, right? So they do arrive with some imprinting, but in their awareness as children, they're not yet highly structured. So there's probably, if they're evaluating anything, it's not what gift is being given. It's more like, what am I feeling right now? It's like being in a kind of emotional water, in a way. One moment. So one might imagine that they feel the sort of temperature and character of the water, and They don't merely feel it, they're interacting with it and transforming it with their own emotions and disposition, right? They're the disposition of the moment within them. And so there's the water, and there's the other child, and there's their disposition, and there's the between of the children, which the flower crosses over, right? Like a little like a little ship carrying, well, probably beautiful. What are they? They're not things. Carrying beautiful. Maybe I'll have to just say carrying beauty. Or making a place of beauty in the between of the two children that they can trust, so that they can then be together without having to be afraid, and perhaps they can play and laugh and learn and adventure in beauty together. And this is good. This is truly good. And both children have a role, and the observers have a role, and the context has a role, and the histories have roles. Oh my gosh. Oh, beautiful. There's a little girl. I don't know, maybe she's 4. She's with her mom. And she's playing mom. In the bowl there's some dirt, and in her hand there's a stick. And she's feeding her mom little spoonfuls or stickfuls of dirt from the bowl, very intently, very carefully, in her mom. And they're both wearing masks, right? But her mom makes the gesture of eating the food like a child would. And the little girl watches very carefully and gets another stickful and offers it to her mom. And her mom makes the gesture of eating it, even though she has a mask on and certainly isn't going to eat dirt. You see, this is the old thing. The little girl and her mother are in a context where the little girl can become the mother, and the mother can become the little girl. And they're playing at that very game together. That might be more important than anything any human being ever said, and than any invention that was ever discovered or produced. That play, that beauty. That transformation. But you see, if you're worried about being observed, or what observers might think, or who might judge you, or how they might judge you, or how you might be excluded or punished, or criticized or ignored, becomes very difficult to play. And adulthood can be very lonely. it's easy for there to become a great deal of drudgery and not much of anything else at all. And over time, as we get older, we imagine unkind observers. Many of us experienced them as children, and some of them experienced them as our parents. Very critical observers, mean observers, people who, offering them a flower results in catastrophe. And just the possibility of being rejected, even seemingly privately, for social animals like us, that's a big risk. We can be really deeply hurt by that. And there's no simple explanation for why. Though many people can pose some, I could pose a few myself, they'll be wildly incomplete. They'll miss something fundamental that's hard or impossible to express in language. As we get older, we develop something like a profile of how we think we are likely to be observed. In other words, what the likely results of observation by possible others are, or by specific others are. And this can be very thinky in people who are disposed to be very much in their heads. But it's also emotional. And it can be mostly emotional in people who aren't so much in their heads. And those people aren't as conscious of these things and they don't necessarily imagine them and think them through. They just instead feel them and are thus inhibited or encouraged, right? Because if you imagine an observational universe where the most likely outcome of your actions is inclusion, celebration, protection, healing, nurturance, reward, accolades, and so on. And since we're just imagining this, let's imagine that those are all really sincere things. They're not just the appearance of them, right? But they're deeply felt by the beings who celebrate and reassure and, cheer us on. And expressed, right? If we imagine an observational universe like that, we are likely to be able to pursue our dreams. And who knows what potentials we might awaken and recover, what faculties and senses and abilities we might develop in a context where we're essentially assured that, we will be seen and loved, celebrated and encouraged, reassured and nurtured, healed and even corrected, but lovingly corrected. In this kind of context, we can flourish. Because there's not merely safety, there's constant streams of different kinds of nourishment for our interiority and our social nature as human beings. But unfortunately, the vast majority of us eventually come to a situation where mostly we feel critically observed, judged, rejected, told what we're doing wrong. People don't celebrate our victories and harass us over our failures. We may be scapegoated, meaning the people, perhaps in our family or relational circles, will pose us as the source of a problem that they themselves create or perpetuate. Right? And then we'll be punished for problems that have nothing to do with us. Maybe because they can find some way to criticize some aspect of how we are. And that's a kind of prison world. That's like torturous. That's agony for a social being like us. Yet millions of people have this experience all the time. And when we're suffering or we're in trouble and we're alone or we're depressed, we really need an inclusive context where we can be, accepted and loved and seen and understood, where we have true companions who will walk with us and support us, just as we walk with and support them. I remember when I was a young adult, I thought man, being an adult is fucking weird. What are you supposed to do with yourself? Right? You don't play anymore, mostly. And of course, we did some playing, because I was with writers and artists and dancers and musicians and actors, and so we had some play in the early part. But as we got older, it died out. And some of those people died, or they, quote unquote, got serious about life. And some of them stayed with their arts. Most of them stayed to some degree with their arts. Some of them were pushed away from the arts by work, or, other circumstances. But I used to just wonder, where do we come together? What do you do at night? Right? What do you do? Where do you go? Say you want to be with other people where there's the possibility of flowers being exchanged, and not just for sex or because of some kind of manipulative or, utilitarian desire, right? But be just authentically. Where do we go? There's no place to go. You go to a bar? Well, that place is already compromised and mostly captured. Though you could transform it, in theory, if you were bold and charismatic. But yeah, there's no place to go. I mean, this is one of the functions the church was kind of weirdly serving while also counterfeiting, I guess, mostly. Although not completely. I don't know. Complex problem there. But yeah, where do we go? There's no place to go to be together and learn and play. There's nothing like the playground, right? What are there? There's bars, shops, and restaurants. And then there's entertainment, right? You can go see theater or watch music or dance, or you could go dancing, okay. But it's so limited, and it's so kind of scripty, right? It's like prefabbed, whatever these places are that we go. And there isn't a place we can go to be with others meaningfully and learn and explore and try to understand our lives and ourselves from a place beyond all the structured fictions that produce the bar and the nightclub and the restaurant and the mall and, and so on. And we need something like this together. We need some place we can go and just be together in little groups and explore and try to recover our humanity and our intelligence, and learn the skills that would help us to be able to sort of return to something more like our deep humanity, even in the bizarrely estranged, multi-layered contexts of nonsense that we're constantly being immersed in and subjected to. So I imagine there could be a place where we could do this. A large indoor space, comfortingly designed and equipped so that little groups of people could just hang out with each other and learn and talk about stuff that really matters and chase wisdom and insight and wonder and beauty and our original nature, the big questions. Perhaps I thought of them as philosophizing, but not merely that. Much of philosophizing is postury, not true enough. Too much dependent on structures and words, less dependent on the spirit of inquiry that could otherwise invitalize it. But yes, I thought of such a place. I thought we must make a place where the adults can go to do things that aren't done. They're not being done together. Amazing things. Maybe even a place to form parties for adventures in the real world. A place where we could have roles that weren't our jobs, that were like our souls or our hearts. A place where we could have conversations that were deep and rich and profound, life-changing. A place where we could comfort and recognize and celebrate each other. A place where we could remember the incredible gift of our humanity and embody it, develop it, enact it, recover it, protect it. Some dreams are invocations of futures. Perhaps all dreams are invocations of futures. But some of the dreams we hold most deeply in our heart, the stuff we really trust, we know is original and true. Those dreams have gravity. They can produce their likenesses in human experience and situation. The child who's offering the flower was dreaming of being together, being safe, being for each other, playfully, of being seen and loved by being seen, and celebrated by being seen, and known, and discovering themselves in relation, because it's in relation that we discover ourselves. So in isolation, it's very challenging to continue that art. I dream for all the people and all the beings that will find a way to remember our togetherness and embody it and enact it that's authentic and trustworthy and doesn't become a schema. It doesn't become a commodity. It isn't advertised. No one owns it. It's not a structure. There's a terrible drought right now in the hearts of many, many people, billions of people. The diverse waters that flow between us and in our souls have dried up momentarily. Sometimes such moments can become long. There's great and terrible travail in the hearts of all the people. There's agony, loneliness, terror. I speak of the world at large, but and I'm speaking in generalities, which I mistrust, as most of you know. But what I mean is, we're all suffering. And even if we're in a happy dream, we're still suffering. And right now is a time unlike any in my lifetime. Some of the fundamental aspects of being human have changed very quickly, very suddenly. The likelihood is that that will continue. We need each other. We have to be brave. We have to find the real flower, not the object, its essence, and give and receive this with each other. We have to become the flows that went away. We have to become the waters that the hearts of the people must have to survive. And sometimes, a very small gesture in great darkness rings with a beauty eternal. Let's not forget that. In fact, maybe we can practice it. Not formally. It's an improvisation, fundamentally. The whole field of relation is improvisatory unless we, script it up, act out the script. Often is fairly tragic, though there are some decent scripts. I wouldn't throw them entirely away. My own heart is very heavy, but the hearts of people I love, many of them are in great pain. And there's no one in their lives that really shares with them, comes to them where they are, meets them where they are, abides with them, reassures them, comforts them, encourages them. Most of these people have no one like this. And if we do have someone like this in our lives, who we can really trust, it's very precious. We should be careful not to take it for granted. Sometimes it's an elder family member or an elder person. Sometimes it's a younger person. Now, I think more than ever in my life, these matters are deeply important. We're not likely to be able to fix the strange monolithic systems in which we presently exist, and by which we are often dominated. An incremental change in those things will mostly drive further disaster. We need to establish something completely different from what's been going on as societies and nations and crap like that. And I don't know if that'll happen, but I have ideas how it might be catalyzed. But I think the more important thing is, if we take too broad a vision, then we miss the opportunities near at hand, and the opportunities for small groups of humans to form something better than a society, more like a family. That's the kind of thing that can happen right now. It doesn't require machines. Or schemas or anything. Right? So at small scales of time and context, it's very easy to play a vastly more interesting and better game than whatever the hell is going on at the broad scale, which is mostly a nightmare, I think. Of course, depends on why you're looking at it, what you see, right? What I see. It takes courage to offer the flower. And actually, it's okay if it's rejected or the other person freaks out. Even if we're judged, it's okay. There's other opportunities, and not every moment is time for a flower. And sometimes we might be able to sense deeply into the situation, so that rather than just having this idea of let's offer a flower, this is the kind of the thing that humans do, right? They reduce things to schemas. Oh, the flower worked before. Let's offer a flower. No. One has to sense what's actually going on in the context with the beings we're with. So sensitivity is the origin of the flower. It's not a schema. Right? It's not just a thing you repeat the inaction of. The sensitivity, like understanding how we can come together, how we can go together right now. That's one of the great miracles of being human. We have these senses of intimacy, so that we can tell, maybe right now the other child is otherwise occupied in their awareness. If we could go to where their awareness is and bide with them there, that can be better than the flower. I'm still trying to understand. I'm still trying to learn, grow. I want, I guess, both for myself, but really for all beings, I want something like a path to the deep fulfillment of the promise of being in bodies, of being humans. And most of the existing structure seems to oppose, consume, capture, or obliterate that. with some few exceptions. You know, exceptions worth celebrating. These are some of my thoughts today as I reflect on the pain that so many of the people I love are feeling. My heart is with them and with you. I look forward to continuing to learn and explore, wonder and dream together, always. Thank you for joining me. With luck, more soon.